To this Rental Scale-Up conference. My name is Thibault. I'm the founder of Rental Scale-Up, the short-term rental news website. And we're going to be talking today about Airbnb, Vrbo, Booking.com, all these online travel agents, the OTAs, and see whether they are friends or foes to hosts. Let me quickly start the presentation so we are right on time. Obviously, this is also being recorded. If you have to leave, you will be getting from Yuvika and my team, you will be getting the video recording, but do stay on because it's going to be fantastic. And without further ado, let me introduce you to the topic. It's like 4 slides, that's it. So it's not death by slide, I promise. All right. Oh, it's all right. Let me share the right screen, that'd be better. There we go. All right, so today with Breslin, Touch Stay and Uplisting, representing Airbnb, Booking.com, Vrbo, friends or foes to hosts. Most of you, I'm guessing today, again, thank you for attending, are hosts or people who are close in the industry. Thank you for attending. So what are we going to be talking about today? Well, first, I'm Thibault. As I said, I'm the founder of Rental Scale-Up. We are a short-term rental industry news website. Every week, you get a free newsletter from us. And we talk about, what the big platforms are doing, like Airbnb, Vrbo. We share market trends in the US, in Europe, for example, and we talk about the latest tech. And also recent news for us, we've been acquired by Price Labs. Hopefully you will get even more fresh data in our articles to that. So today, what are we talking about? Well, with Breslin, Touch Stay and Uplisting, we'll be talking about these several topics here, right? On one hand, we see the share of bookings going up. The share of bookings made on OTA is growing. It has been growing over the years, but why? If this is growing, why do people think OTAs are, these online platforms are foes to hosts like us? And sometimes, on the other hand, why are they going to be seen as friends? So it's a very interesting dynamic that we always had in the industry, but yet in this time where we hear about recession, when we hear about softening demand, how does that change the balance between, let's say, book direct, for example, and living only from bookings from Airbnb? How does this dynamic is changing? How are hosts reacting, adapting, and what do our speakers think about it? So we'll be, of course, taking questions. So in the chat box in Zoom, you are able to add your questions during the conference, and we'll make sure in the end to leave at least 10 minutes to answer to your questions live. So it's going to be a panel. We're going to try to keep it as fun and as possible and interesting, but as well, you will be, of course, able to talk about this. So, as I said, we have 3 experts today. We have Mark Simpson, the founder of Breslin, Andrew McNulty, the founder of Touch Stay, and Vinny Breslin, he's the co-founder of Uplisting. I will just now let each of them introduce themselves, tell us about what they do, what their company does, and also why they are, what a great fit to be speaking about this topic today. Mark, do you want to get started?
Yeah, sure. Hello, everybody. So my name is Mark Simpson, founder of Breslin, author of a little book called The Playbook. I can see many Team Breslin members in the chat, so nice to see everybody in here. My mission is to help 1 million hosts cut down on their over-reliance on Airbnb and the OTAs, and we do that, and we specialize with this with website design. We specialize it with content creation and giving the tactics, the tool, and the training to hosts to get more direct bookings all over the world. Bit of a milestone just recently passed. Our websites that we create have been just past a $2 million mark in direct bookings generated that we've tracked from those websites for our clients, which is pretty cool. So yeah, thank you for having me part of this. Looking forward to digging into the topic. And if you are a Team Breslin member in the chat, please do say hi so I can see you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Andy, how about you? Welcome.
Thank you, Thibault. Welcome. Hi, everybody. It's actually really cool to see so many familiar faces here. I see Rachel, Helen, etc. So many of you, I'm sure, know what TouchStay does, given that I can see so many familiar names. But if you don't, we are a digital guidebook provider. So all of that stuff that you tell your guests, they may read it, they may not. Emails that you send them, Word docs that you print out, all that kind of stuff. It's a digital place for you to store all of that information. The idea being that your guests do actually read. And I know that guests read. Fact. Lots of people think they don't, but they do. It's just about giving them a reason to read. And so that's what TouchStay does. Why am I here on this panel? Well, actually, even though I'm a vendor, I actually first started in this industry as a guest. So my perspective is always with the guest lens. And I've had the good fortune through running TouchStay to see so many wonderful success stories, both book direct, but also those who aren't reliant on book direct, who actually happily go through the OTAs and do a really good job of it. Lastly, I have my own experience as a guest, having been on the negative side of the OTAs, trying to cancel a booking in 2021, pressing the cancel button 1 hour too late on the Airbnb platform, and my host refusing to refund me because the host had a bad experience with Airbnb themselves and were refusing to flex the rules and approve a refund for me. So that was a horrible experience. So part of me is also, well, what's it like for the guest using the OTA? So that's me. Thanks, Thibault.
Yeah, thank you, Andy. Last not least, Vinny from Uplisting. Hello, how are you? I think good morning to you. You're in the US, aren't you?
Yeah, just gone at 30, just had the kids, sent the kids off to school. So ready to talk OTAs and short-term rentals. Thanks, Thibault. So I'm one of the founders of Uplisting. We are an Airbnb preferred software partner, as well as Booking.com, Vrbo, Google Vacation Rentals, direct bookings. We're Uplisting's, if you're not familiar with software like Uplisting, it's a self-serve property and channel manager built specifically for short-term rentals. So our members manage thousands of properties on our platform and millions of dollars in bookings across all booking sites. We're going to process around 30 million in direct bookings this year, so we're kind of over 16 million so far. So I feel like we have a good idea of how direct bookings can help and how they work for our hosts. Direct bookings are around 15% of bookings on our platform, just to throw a bit of a stat out there for if you're interested. And aside from the software, like my background's actually working for an Airbnb competitor, so I think I have a good insight into how the channels work, how the OTAs work. And I also co-run a kind of large short-term rental property in Ireland, so remotely. And we have about 60% of our bookings are direct there. That's me.
Thank you, Vinny. So to get started, obviously, we have a lot of people who are in the room, I'm guessing from Mark's movement, right, Book Direct. And just to tease you, right, I want to look at data. I think what's interesting, Vinny started showing stats about the share of, bookings on Uplisting made through the big platforms, what we call the OTAs, the online travel agencies, like Airbnb, Booking, and Vrbo. Let's look at this share because kind of looks like it's growing, and I want to know why. So let's have a quick look at data. So it's like 2 slides, and that's the last slide of today, because I'm pretty sure you enjoy seeing our mugs much more than slides, or hopefully so. I'm not sure. But let me share again my screen to tell you more about that. So I hope it's not too small. Can you guys see my screen? Yep. Great. So, all right, this is a graph taken from Skift. Skift is an online publication, a leading source of data for our industry. And basically what this graph is showing is since 2010 up to an estimated 2025, as a projection, the gross booking value is growing in the industry. That's the gross booking value, the value of overall growth of bookings in the world in $1 billion, right? In billions of dollars. And here what you can see in light blue is the share of these bookings made online on different platforms, direct, not direct. And here you see the share made through the top 5 platforms, Top 5 in here would be Airbnb, Vrbo, Booking.com, TripAdvisor as well, and Tuja in China, which is a big player. And what you can see here, basically, I would say around, in 2021, 22, the share of that is 60%. It has grown drastically since 2014, right? When it was 12%, like 60% of that. So if people hate so much, if hosts hate so much the OTAs, how come the share of OTAs is growing so much, right? So that's my first teaser, and that's why I want to hear our speakers talk about. And another thing to notice is that this growth, right? I talked about 2014. It obviously really linked to the growth of the growth, amazing growth of Airbnb, such a success story for this platform, right? Airbnb here is in light blue, and that's basically the share of in bookings in value in billions of dollars. How many bookings in value are going through Airbnb, right? Obviously, it's gone down in value with COVID. But the projection is going to go, it has gone back up already. That's a document from last year, but we know it's gone back up already, even higher than 2019. But you can see that this distant second is Booking Holdings, Booking.com, and then you have Vrbo, and basically TripAdvisor has almost disappeared, and Tuja in China is there, but it's not as a major player, right? So kind of looks like the share of OTAs is going up. So what's happening first, right? What are we seeing here? I'm going to ask the speakers that question, and starting with Mark, right? What are we seeing here? Are we seeing that something like that is happening, right? People are guests, and you talk about guest viewpoint. Guests are booking through the OTAs because that they like it, or for example, is there something else happening? Has there been an influx of supply, for example, and a certain type of supply that's only, for example, only want to take booking from OTAs and doesn't care about having their own website, and they're happy this way, for example. So I'm trying to understand what's happening here, what are we seeing, and what it means for us.
Yeah.
Mark, can we get started?
Yeah, 100%. Thank you very much. So something that the graph doesn't show, and it would be interesting to find out maybe afterwards, would be in that skiffed graph, how many and what's the predictions of that, and where is it coming from in the world? Because my personal viewpoint, when you showed me this graph yesterday, when we were talking about what we're going to discuss today, and this is from my personal experience of the people that I have met in this industry who are just getting started, or maybe like 1 or 2 years in. And if we particularly look at the USA, so in the US market, and you've got operators and management companies over there, it's very different to how it would potentially work in Europe. Like I can see so many European operators here in the chat, in the UK and over on the mainland there. In America, you've got, especially with 2020 and COVID and everything that happened there, you've got investors, you've got people that are real estate investors, and a lot of them have had their head turned at this world of short-term rentals purely because of the cash on cash returns and all of like the profits that you can make of it compared to a traditional long-term let. And because of that, and because there is no barrier to entry, because it is so easy to get started in this industry, you've got people that are turning their long-term lets and turning it into a short-term rental. And then what are they naturally going to do? They're going to go to the first thing that they see or know or brand leader, which is obviously Airbnb. So it would explain the two charts there in such that the reason why Airbnb and that crazy growth trajectory is because of that. But also as well, what you'll find is that these investors, they will just list it. They'll just have their one property or two properties, and they'll just list it on one channel. Now, I can see so many Team Boostly members in the chat, and thing that I talk about all the time when it comes to marketing is not just being listed on one place. You've got to be listed on multi-channels. And there's so many people in Europe that is just common practice. Like everybody here knows that you can't just be on, say, booking.com. You've got to be on, Airbnb, X, Y, and Z, as well as having your own direct booking site. But in America, the mindset is different. In America, the mindset is, I'll just put it on Airbnb, sound, don't have to worry about it. So for me, I feel like that would explain that graph. It would be that there's so many people who are coming into the market, the people that have are investors. They're not, they're not coming into this, in a career in hospitality isn't their main focus. This is just like a thing that they're doing, and they're just listing it on Airbnb. And that's why it would be really cool to see like a subgraph of the one above and say, well, what's the split in Europe compared to America? But that's how I view those two charts for sure.
Very thought-provoking, Mark, in that sense, because you're talking about, Europe versus US, and also the importance, in your view, of being listed on multiple platforms. And I think, Vinny, that's something that obviously with Uplisting, you enable hosts to be listed on different platforms. So when you hear Mark saying this, what he just said, what's your reaction here? How do you see it?
Well, from what Mark said on the multiple channels, I think it's true for sure. If we look at our US members, the majority of them are Airbnb and maybe Vrbo or Vrbo. UK have a huge amount of bookings coming through Booking.com. The US members are very rarely on Booking.com. So there's definitely some nuances there between different booking sites and how you've approached the market, as Mark said. And there's so many factors at play though. Like there's the chicken and egg, kind of the supply is really hard. So from an Airbnb perspective or a smaller booking site perspective, they're constantly fighting for supply of properties. And once you have supply and a great brand and a good platform like Airbnb does, then you own all the traffic. And it's really hard to compete with that. And as the market becomes more mainstream, guests need reliability. They know Airbnb works. Airbnb does very, very well on the guest side for the most part. So you become loyal to that platform. You know it works. Then it's really hard for smaller niche sites to get a footing in the market because like from a supply perspective, it's difficult for them to get the properties on board, but also from kind of the back end perspective where not having accurate. So Airbnb typically, unless you're using software like Uplisting, Airbnb is the calendar of record where all your prices are synced. Having a host update all those prices and availability on loads of niche websites is just not going to happen. It doesn't happen. So then the guest has a really bad experience in those niche websites because they can't book the property instantly, or the prices are wrong, or the booking's cancelled. So I think there's so many factors that just come into play to result in that graph and what we're seeing in the market.
Yeah, and I think you touched upon also on a point, Vinny, is we talk about supply a lot with Mark, and also there's the demand, right? And there's obviously, these bookings are the result not just of listings appearing on these big platforms, but people booking, right? Guests booking on this platform. And I think, and Andy, you always have this. You said in the introduction you were coming in with this guest view of that. So how should you see this, maybe from a guest viewpoint, and why this booming like this?
Yeah, it's interesting when you look at the graphs and you put the graphs on top of each other. So like read the two graphs together. It's clear that in 2014, Airbnb had about 5% of that gross booking volume, whereas in 2019 it's 25%. And even more interesting to see that the predictions from Skift are that Airbnb is going to grow even further as a percentage of bookings in later years. And I think that's down to one thing. It's simply that they've done a great job, love them or hate them, they've done a great job of raising the awareness of this sector to travelers. And for a guest like me, well, maybe I'm not your typical guest because I'm in this industry, so I don't think it's only an Airbnb. I know I'm not staying at an Airbnb, but loads of guests just I'm staying at an Airbnb now. So it's the place they go to, and as the others have said, the product is great. Like it's really easy to use. It's very convenient, and you can't really find any other platforms out there that are top of mind that you can go and easily search. Booking, yeah, perhaps Vrbo sort of, but then you're into a really, really long tail of stuff. So it's kind of no surprise for me. And yes, I did have one terrible experience with Airbnb, but on the whole, it's just very easy to use. I think the one thing and we'll get onto this a bit, I'm sure, but as I see that graph going bigger and bigger in later years, it's clear that they're going to start becoming a more dominant force than they even are now. And that, as a guest, just does raise a few questions with me around the quality of what's on Airbnb and how easy it will be to find what I want. But that's kind of drifting into later stuff. I know we want to talk about later stuff, but that's my opinion, Thibault. It's just a great, great brand story, which elevates everybody in this industry, right? Whether you like them or not, it's really raised the awareness of our industry.
Yeah, and it's something I would add, because full disclosure, right? I used to work at booking.com, and I worked for 5 years at the headquarters. So I see people who say booking is horrible. So I'm not going to comment on that. I know where you're coming from. I was a host on booking.com as well. I get it. But what I would mention, though, is that indeed, used to be that people would, there's been vacation rentals before that, right? And the graph we saw is like the share of stuff being online, and online, the growth of this platform taking over the share, right? Obviously, it has shifted more and more online, but offline, there were a lot of bookings happening, right? And what's been interesting indeed with Airbnb, I think you used to look for a rental by an owner. That was a thing, right? Rental by owners. That was a thing. I wouldn't say an RBO, but you were staying in a rental by owner. Now it's clearly an Airbnb. But what's interesting, Airbnb has popularized this, and also Booking.com in Europe has a role into this as well, in the sense that a lot of people who only would have stayed in hotels, for example, have been able to be introduced to vacation rental on Booking.com, because it's the one platform that offers everything, right? So especially within pandemic, what we've seen as well, we've seen enough people who would never have stayed in hotels start using Booking.com or Airbnb or Vrbo to discover our industry, right? To discover vacation rental. So in a way, indeed, they've been able to sort of make it more popular, right? Now, is it something we like or not? That's not the sentiment we're going to now, but instead, it's like they made it popular. Now, should we just be on with them as a host or not? Let's talk about that now again, and let's go to the meat here in a way of the debate. And why do some people really not only just not like them or find them horrible, but even see them as enemies or foes? Or I was at a conference recently where Booking.com described itself as sometimes being called as a necessary evil. So why do people see that? And maybe Mark, I'm pretty sure you have a lot of things to say about it.
Yeah, no, it's interesting that Booking.com described themselves as that, as the necessary evil, because it's pretty clear why. They spend so much money, all of them, not just Booking.com, all of them spend so much money positioning themselves as the brand experts on Google and whatnot. So they get the majority of the traffic. And this industry that we are in, of hospitality, short-term rentals, however you want to call it, is a bit weird, because we're in the industry of making memories. And because of that, we are so in demand. There's no other industry that I know of. For example, Boostly, we do website design. There's not a website that I can go and list my services on that I can pretty much be guaranteed revenue and bookings and revenue and clients coming in. But that's what we get with Airbnb. That's what we get with Booking.com and Vrbo. Because it is so in demand, and there are so many people searching on there, and there are dates in your calendar that you know that you could sell your property or properties or your rooms 3 or 4 times over. And so it's a blessing in that, but it's also a curse, because it is so easy. You as a host become over-reliant, and you just go, it's all right. I've got all these plates that I've got to spin as a hospitality owner. The marketing side, I can just put over there. Don't have to worry about it. And then it becomes a curse, because you become so over-reliant. And I got on stage this year in Nashville in front of 1,000 hosts in America. And I got everybody to stand up. And I said, if 90% or more of your bookings come in from Airbnb, stay stood up. And out of those 1,000 people, about, I think, half of the room stood standing. And I said, congratulations, you don't have a job. Sorry, you don't have a business, sorry, you have a job, and Brian Chesky's your boss, which got a reaction, but it's true, because when you are so reliant, 90% plus of your total bookings, your total revenue is coming in from one channel, you are literally playing by their rules. And because of that, they can change their rules at any time. And you can see it this year. There's been so many instances and so many flags in the ground that you can see. Number one, they changed the whole layout of their website. They brought in categories, and all of a sudden you've got businesses and hosts in the Facebook groups complaining, saying, I was on page 1, I was first in my listing in my area, but now I'm on like page 9 or whatever. I know what to be seen. And when you are so reliant on one channel, or even just channels to be doing so, then you are literally behest by them. And they've done so many other things this year by changing the policies, by making you pay for X, Y, and Z. And the worry for me, by seeing that second graph and the projected growth of Airbnb is that what is stopping them in 2025, 2026, or 2027 turning around to the industry and saying, dear host, you've been on our website now for a while. We now cover 60, 70% of the whole market. We feel like that 15% commission or 14% commission that you're paying us isn't fair. We're going to boost it up to 20, 30, 40, 50%, or we're going to bring in more stricter rules and they're going to take away more of the benefits. And that is the worry. And that is why it is a foe to me if we just continue to let them do what we are doing.
Yeah, I get that. I mean, it makes sense. And it is interesting because on one hand, you could indeed, especially in the US, right, that Airbnb enable the whole class of entrepreneurs to get started in the business. And I like your view to say, are you an entrepreneur or are you an employee? Or at least what's your actual relationship with Airbnb when you depend so much on someone? And it is interesting indeed. Sometimes when, I don't know, in some countries, for example, right, if you hire somebody to do something, even a freelance person, and you actually are their sole provider of revenues, at some point, a judge can requalify your relationship as like a working contract. You are an employee. We talk about Uber drivers and things. I don't go there, but it's a very thought-provoking viewpoint, Mark. Thanks a lot for sharing. Vinny, what's your view here? I mean, obviously, Mark talked a lot about the relationship, the tight relationship with Airbnb or any platform, for example. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I think we see it all the time where hosts don't realize how much control the OTAs or like Airbnb has over them until something goes wrong. It happens all the time. It's like, Airbnb, you've got my back. That's what the default position probably is for most people who rely on Airbnb and get a lot of value from Airbnb. But if they turn around and take your listings off because you've had a review flagged by their AI, for example, and you're offline for 2 weeks, then you're not in control of your business at that point. So it's very concerning, and you don't realize it until it actually happens to you. So being aware of that I think it's very important. That Airbnb are they've got so many properties, they've got so many hosts. You as an individual host and property owner, you don't matter. You're not their most important factor. So you need to be aware of that, I think. I was talking to one of our a really high-end Airbnb operator a few weeks ago, rents their properties for like $2,000 a night, and they had a guest come in for a week stay, so they're going to earn like 10-15 grand. And they came in and the carbon monoxide alarm was beeping. So the guest called up Airbnb, got the stay cancelled immediately. It was just the carbon monoxide alarm had run out of batteries, and it could have been solved within 5 minutes by somebody coming out and fixing it. But that's the kind of control that you don't have over your business with relying on OTAs like that.
Interesting. And so I'm reading the comments, and of course, do leave your question in the comments, right? I'm reading messages like we talk about like for example, I know Hector also mentioning that Airbnb has the most traffic, the best product, or Susie mentioning that, as Andy said, they have the best brand, right? It's you
Definitely.
book an Airbnb, you Airbnb, or as a host, you Airbnb your place, right? You Airbnb your place. Yeah, it's indeed interesting, and but what bit more point here, Vinny, on this, because for example, Airbnb, I think you mentioned, they introduced a couple of months back this new rule, right? In the sense that, as you said, you now, after a guest checks in, they have up to 72 hours, 3 days to complain and say there's something big that's bothering them, and they may want a refund. Used to be 24 hours, now 72 hours. I don't know about the stats. Well, I'm kind of know about the stats, but a lot of stays on Airbnb are just for 3 days. So basically, for a lot of stays, the whole stay, people can complain, get a refund. So isn't it introducing some kind of insecurity as well for hosts?
Yeah, for sure, absolutely. And I don't really understand where the need for that harsh of a policy, to be honest. But yeah, I mean, I haven't actually heard any anybody complain about this issue since it's been released. I'm sure there are people out there being affected, but yeah, I mean, having 72 hours where you're not confident, hopefully when you get a guest checked in within a few hours or the next day, at least you're confident that that reservation is going smoothly and you're going to get paid for the stay. But waiting for 3 days to kind of confirm that the booking is you're going to get paid for your work is concerning. It's stressful.
Andy, on your side, let's talking about the guest side, right? This whole, and we're talking a lot about Airbnb, right? But that's just an example. It's on people's mind, but as well, when things go wrong on the guest side as well, they may be actually consequences of the tensions between the hosts and the platform sometimes spill over onto the guests themselves. What do you think of that?
Yeah, 100% agree, Thibault. By the way, also, this isn't going to be, we are going to come on to the good parts of OTAs. Like, I'm reading all the comments, everyone's like, no. There are some good points, obviously, but let's continue on the faux element for now, because you're right, Thibault. I think from my experience anyway, there's this guardedness, there's this friction that now is pretty rife between people who are on Airbnb and Airbnb themselves. And that ends up spilling over onto the guest side. I had an example that I explained earlier when I introduced myself, where I was at the wrong end of somebody who was pretty pissed with Airbnb, and they took it out on me as the guest. And ultimately we're hospitality. We're here to provide a hospitable experience to guests. And that's a shame. So and that is something that happens when you have the kind of dynamic whereby there isn't a trust or there isn't a genuine liking between the lister on Airbnb, you guys, and Airbnb themselves. But the reality is, that like the others have said it, you're on their land. They make the decisions. You put your asset with them, and you're at their mercy. So. Yes, they're foes, but like if you go in with your eyes open on that kind of stuff, there's really a lot that you can do to prep yourself to react should things head south. So of course, list yourself on multiple channels, use a channel manager to do that. Of course, have your own website, and on your own website, own your reviews, own your Google reviews. Make sure that you are, if I was listing on Airbnb, I don't know how legit this is, but probably you all do it. But if I was listing on Airbnb, I'd be putting my brand name on my listing description or wherever I could in my Airbnb, and just talking about the service level I've got, because there are a chunk of guests that then go and find that and search for that. I do it all the time now. And so I use Airbnb as like a window, but I go and find the person that's actually running that business and book direct with them. So use the OTAs in that way. And, I think instead of looking at it as kind of the enemy, we're going to look at it in terms of, well, yes, there are some negatives to being on there and there are some watch outs, but like, how can you spin that around? How can you start now to kind of position yourself so that some of those negativities you start to take control back and own? And I think the multi-channel listing, the book direct website, and the owning of reviews are really important in that context.
Very interesting. And indeed, Andy, let's switch stuff. Let's talk about, how OTAs sometimes, also friends, right? I really want to push that. And for example, I was reading a comment here from Shannon, who says, she does rent out, I think she said, sorry, can't say that today, I don't know why. She shares a room in her apartment or her house. And for first-time bookers, she feels safer. You're getting them through Airbnb. Airbnb has some kind of I'm guessing there's a guest profile. You have some kind of insurance, things go bad. The resolution center, she feels safer. But of course, she's happy to have people who come back, book direct. So in some cases, you could argue that why don't you use, in this case, she just mentioned, you can use the OTAs to get your guests for the first time, or as you said, Andy, as well, get your name out there. Like for example, on Airbnb or even on Booking.com, you get, if you're a company, you can have your logo out there on the website. Such a great billboard effect. Can leverage this, right? But how else can we see that? And last thing to say is, of course, as a guest as well, right? As a host, I may want something to happen, right? But as a guest, I'm also always curious to ask people who are really we should book direct. How many of us, right, book direct on a hotel website versus Booking.com, for example, or actually go and and book directly from other hosts. We may do that. Do we do this always, all the time? I don't know, especially when travel abroad, for example, with somebody who's not speaking English is not my first language. You heard that, can hear it very clearly, right? So I got properties abroad, and you know what? I think the platforms will do a better job marketing my platform to people who don't speak my language and bring these people to me because I'm open to international guests and they have support in my guest language, so it's less awkward. And so there's all kind of ways I see the positive thing. So that's my teasing part, right? I'm going to start with you again, Andy, on the as I said, right, it could be a great guest experience, for example, on the platforms. In that sense, if a platform is bringing like more more exposure internationally, for example, then the OTA is my friend, don't you think?
I agree with you, Thibault. Just covering off the earlier part of what you were saying there, I think as you see those numbers into 2025 and Airbnb having even more of a stronghold, the thing that I think is a whopping opportunity that is a really negative aspect of Airbnb today, vis-a-vis you guys, is that today, even with all of their listings, I find it really hard to find quality as a guest. And that can only get worse. Like if we're looking into 2025 and we're seeing their growth, that's going to become even worse. So I think there's a whopping opportunity here to stand out. And it's very obvious very quickly when you're searching on Airbnb what's good and what's bad. And there may be lots and lots and lots of listings, but as many filters that I can use, I will use and try and, you know, get my choice down to as few as possible and then quickly scan them. And you can really easily tell the bad ones. There's still crap photos leading. There's still dreadful copy. There's still so much amateur that goes on. And that's what's fueled by Airbnb. There's all these micro entrepreneurs that come in. Some of them do it really well. Some of them do it terribly. There's your opportunity. If you can, and that sounds basic and hopefully you've all got it, but you know, if you've got the great photos leading and you've got really crisp, clear copy and you've got not all caps, get it here, deep sail on, you know, avoid all that kind of terrible language, but really articulate what it is you stand for and what's different about you. And you're right, try and get your branding in there. Like as businesses, if you get your brand on the about profile, there's your window. And so for me, as if we flip into like Friends, I think Friends is a bit of a stretch to see any OTA. You know, they are bringing you a huge amount of leads, as we all know, but they 100% should be part of your business because of that reach. But just be realistic about that relationship, as we've already said. I do think the one aspect which probably is overlooked a little bit in the conversation so far is the trust. You know, they really do engender trust as a guest. If I book direct, I still have a reservation about who I'm really booking with and what happens if it goes wrong. And I think there's lots you can do to make sure that risk goes away. So owning your reviews, which means that if I find you on a book direct website, I can see your reviews and hopefully your Google reviews, independent, you know, reviews there, hopefully. And I think that is what the OTAs do very well, is that they create that sense as a guest, whether it's right or wrong in reality, whether it's reality in the end, it does create a sense of trust as a guest. And, you know, we want to as a guest, always be sure that biggest spend we're making, apart from our rent or our mortgage payment each year, is going to result in a good stay. And I think it's very easy. It's very easy for a guest too. It's easy to transact on there as well. So I think for those reasons, there's lots that's good about the OTAs. But I think you know, you can definitely leverage some of those things we've spoken about to make sure that time where it becomes a foe, you're ready. You've got all those ducks in a row.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that on a trust side. It's a very interesting factor, right? It's also, you know, as a host, I may trust the platform a lot, and I may also trust that, for example, if this, you know, somebody makes a payment on these platforms, I will actually get paid. And also the trust on the guest side, right? How do you replicate that on your website with the reviews, for example, any kind of certificate signal you can give? It is tricky, right? To you know, try to say I'm going to compete with a big brand to be as trustful. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it is, you have to be aware of it and tricky, and take actions to make it happen. And Vincent, Vinny had talked earlier about how, for example, for my own properties, which are located abroad, and we cater a lot to international tourists, I'm very happy to have OTAs, because there's no way I could market in my property, in let's say in Spanish, my Spanish is terrible, for example, or in German at the same time, all this reach, right, that these OTAs provide me because they automate, for example, translation of listings, automate translation of reviews. So people in different languages can see the same review. So they have incredible reach. So what do you think that aspect of them being friends and by others by providing us this kind of like reach?
Yeah, your English is very good, by the way. We can all hear it very well. Yeah, I mean, traffic is like, as Andy mentioned, it's all about traffic. Well, a lot is about the traffic. The Airbnb audience is not going away. Being able to create a listing, a new property, put a listing up on Airbnb and get a booking like within an hour or two is very, a lot of you have to, I don't think that there's a scenario, or there's very few scenarios where hosts and property managers are not using an OTA in some respect to get some bookings. I think the way that we kind of think about it is Airbnb, Booking.com, Vrbo, Google Vacation Rentals, whatever it is, be on them, work on your direct booking strategy, try and get as many bookings outside of those platforms as possible because you make more money, you're in control and everything else. But detaching yourself entirely from OTAs is very, very difficult. I don't think that's realistic for most.
Not realistic for most. And then I'm turning to Mark here because Mark, tough exercise for you, and I'm sure everybody wants to hear you about it. So how are OTAs your friends?
So one thing that I've said quite a lot, and I say it to a lot of people, is it is as dangerous going 100% book direct as it is going 100% OTA reliance. There's no, you can't have one or the other, you need to have both. And where they are your friends is that when you need them, they are there for you. I was trying to think of something clever to say around friends with benefits, but I couldn't make it work. So what I will say is that in the shoulder season, which for a lot of people who are in the Northern Hemisphere, you're coming into your shoulder season. Now, this is where you need the help of the OTAs for all the reasons that have been stated by Andy, Vinny, and so many of us in the comments, because they have the traffic, they have the people on there. And what I would say to everybody is that you have to be listed on them, not just one, you have to be listed everywhere. You have to treat them like a marketing channel, not the be all and end all. I think it's Susie who's been really knowledgeable in the chat and in the comments has been saying, you've got to use it like a Facebook or an Instagram or a LinkedIn. That's how you would treat an Airbnb, a Vrbo, or a Booking.com. It's not your be all and end all where you're getting so reactive and just waiting for the Airbnb ping to come in that you've got a booking. So you have to make it work for you and not the other way around. They are 100% your friends in that. I look at our family business. Our farm, our 200-acre farm stay property was in the middle of nowhere. We would never have grown to the success that we had in our farm stay property if it wasn't for Booking.com, because it put us on the international map. We had people aware and staying with us from Germany, from Australia, China, from all over, New Zealand, and we would never have got there if it wasn't for their help. But the one thing that we did, and it's something we'll go and talk on to next, is that we never, ever, ever just relied on them for our bookings. We were very proactive in that. So amazing points said. I think everybody realizes the power of them. But yeah, keep them as friends. They're your friend until they aren't your friend, which is why I do what I do, which is why so many people are in this chat, and which is why there's so much shit being thrown in the comments box.
So they're your friends until they're not. So I want to make sure we've been taking questions already, which is great, but I want to make sure we keep time for questions at the end. So moving on right now to the fourth topic. So we talked about, this dichotomy, right? Friends versus foes, and it's good of things, but recession, maybe there's a recession coming, right? And we hear a lot about this, and I've heard a lot of people in the industry tell me last 2 years, there was a great boom, especially in the US or in Europe. We got a lot of people booking directly. We could afford to just keep the best dates for us, our availability, and keep it for ourselves, and put the worst dates possible, the low season dates on the OTAs. But you know what, 2023, kind of scary. I'm gonna, make myself more available on the OTAs. So what do you think? All three of you, like Vincent, Andy, and then Mark, what do you think? Should people jump back into the arms of the OTAs now that winter is coming?
I think it's really hard. We talked about this yesterday. It's really difficult to predict what's going to happen, if anything. I think Andy mentioned the quality of properties in one of the other questions. I think that's going to be really, really key in any kind of environment. If it's the case of saturation in the market, or if we're going into a recession, you need a property stand out, and you might have to obviously reduce your prices to get the bookings, but we still have the same expectations as guests. We still want to stay in nice properties. We want to go with our families or with our friends, whatever it is. So the property type, I think, is really important, and maybe those kind of mid-market, low-level properties will be affected greater. On the flip side, maybe they won't. Maybe they're cheaper, so we'll stay there. I don't know what the answer to that question is, but there's a few kind of factors at play. But I know we saw during COVID that we thought it was going to be a total disaster for the industry, and we were kind of early on with our software. We were kind of offering discounts and whatever else to our members, and offering the software for free. But there was a huge boom after 3 or 4 months, especially in the US. So we saw loads of new properties coming on board, lots of new operators listing on Airbnb or listing on multiple channels. So I don't know, very, very hard to tell what's going to happen, but people still travel, there'll be bookings. And I think if your property stands out, then you should be okay. But just sorry, on the OTA question, then yes, if you're not on OTAs, I mean, as we said before, you need to be on them. You can't disconnect entirely from them. So you need to be there. You need to be optimizing your listings. You need to be monitoring your prices, getting your reviews, doing everything that you possibly can to increase your ranking.
Have we lost Vinny?
Oh.
Easy. Need to put 50 cent in that New York router for you.
All right. Vinny had
80 megabytes. I don't know what's going on.
Right. All right. How about you, Andy? What's your view on the topic?
What's my view on the topic? Do I, Andy McNulty, predict a recession or not? It's a big question. Listen, I don't know. Like the others, I don't know. Of course, the negative sentiment is here. It's every day in the news. It's a reality. However, in every negative situation, there are always a number of positives that you can extract. And as Vinny said, COVID was a complete disaster, or so we thought, for the industry, until it rebounded and gave us the best 2 years. And it's interesting how people really value travel, and they will travel. They'll work very hard at trying to travel. And anyone that's got a staycation property, I think you might see a bit more of that. Maybe we can't afford to travel long distances and jump on a plane, but we can travel locally. If you've had a really good couple of years, I'd be really interested to know if you've been reinvesting that good bumper years into tools. Like, for example, Claire's mentioned that it's a bit of a day job for her, so it's hard to work, and I appreciate probably a lot of people like this. It's like they have a real day job and then they've got this thing on the side. And how can you I don't know, you take best advantage of all this? It is hard, but I would consider, if you've had really good years, trying to think about ways in which you can invest some of that definitely into your branding. So if you've got a Book Direct website, great, refresh it if you haven't, get one, but also into tools like dynamic pricing, for example. I know there's lots of sort of leery, like, I don't want to put a technology in charge of my pricing. So fine, set a floor, set a limit to which you want the price to not go below, and then let the tool do the rest, and it will adjust if there's funky times in the economy, or if it's seeing short or long demand. I would take advantage of that. I seriously would. And then just set that floor so that you're not at risk particularly. I think it's a massive opportunity given the weakness in the pound for those of you who are British operators. I would be looking at, trying to target more of those Americans. Do you have places in locations where there's a really strong, historic tourism business that, the Americans would be very interested in. And work with some local niche listing sites, DMOs, destination management organizations, who will give you exposure to their US clients, their US group travel clients. Think about that. As I said, there are opportunities. So whether you think recession's coming or not, I think there are things you can do now that will allow you to take advantage if that happens, and it will allow you to thrive even if it doesn't.
Thank you, Andy. Mark, how about you? Do you think people will jump back into the arms of the OTAs with a recession, possible recession, sorry?
Yeah, well, I think we spoke about this briefly yesterday, and we are coming out the back of what has been the biggest travel lockdown that I've definitely seen in my lifetime, and most have been seen in their lifetime. And if, for example, staycations become a thing again, then we've got a playbook to literally run by from 2020. I can see like Helen, based in Compet in southern of Spain, and all of a sudden what traditionally would have been British people that were flying over, she had to like think outside the box and target different types of guests, which resulted in different types of guests being aware of the property, maybe some of them she would never market to before. So, and it's the same for a lot of people. And if we can survive, if you are here and you had a business in January 2020, and if you're still here, well done, you've survived. And so I feel like even in a financial recession that could be coming, people still need to travel. We haven't got an unlimited inventory here. There's only a certain amount of heads on beds that you need to fill. The trick is to be doing your sales and your marketing. Be proactive. Don't be reactive. I got this tattoo done at the middle of 2020, and it's a Viking symbol for create your own reality, which basically means focus on what you can control. So turn off the news, turn off all that shite that is being thrown out elsewhere. You don't need it. You just need to focus on what you can do every single day to be getting those heads on beds. And just spend 5 to 30 minutes every day. Ideally, the first thing that you do, spend it on being proactive, whether that is posting in a Facebook group, whether that is emailing a previous guest, whether it is looking to work with local businesses and something you can do in your community that will generate awareness of you are who you are, and we can pass business your way and work together. Just 5 to 30 minutes being proactive in your marketing. Doesn't matter whether you've got a full-time job or not. If you want to cut down on your over-reliance on Airbnb, cut down on your over-reliance on booking.com, there's so many different ways you can do it. And a little plug, there's a book right here. It's got 101 ways that you can do it, called the Book Direct Playbook. And a couple of them mentioned that in the chat. And it really can be done. You don't have to rely on the OTAs. You don't have to jump back in the arms of the OTAs. You can do it, and you can do it where you can be 65% direct, 35% others. And others can include OTAs if you really want them to.
So nice plug. Well done. And I thought your tattoo was Vinny's Uplisting logo. Anyway, so taking a few questions fast. I saw one. I can give the answer. This one I will hopefully help you. Somebody's asking how you can have your OTA reviews on your website. I think Andy said it was very important. There are a couple of solutions. One called reviews, for example. I would write it down because the way it's written is like REVYOOS. Really involves you, for example, to import your reviews from Airbnb and Vrbo, for example, and Google, and display those on your website as a trust signal. That could be interesting. That's one.
Can you write it in the chat?
I will write it in the chat. Exactly. Thank you for chiming in. I will do. Meanwhile, so we'll have time to take another question. Somebody says, if I'm in Puerto Rico, for example, on the US, and I want to attract European travelers, how may I do that?
What was the question?
If my properties are in the US or in Puerto Rico, and I want to attract more European travelers, how may I do that? Or a solution, for example.
Yeah. So first and foremost, before you go, well, I want to attract new people. What you need to do first and foremost is you need to do a bit of research on who is actually coming to Puerto Rico, who is actually coming to your island. Because I can say, well, I'm based in Puerto Rico and I would love to get some Australians, but if Australians aren't coming to your island, then what's the point? You've got to take a step back and figure out who your guest avatar is, the ideal person that you want to walk through your doors. And it starts with a little bit of research. So you're going to have to go to maybe your DMO or look at some studies or whatever it may be and go, right, who are the majority of the people that are coming to this area? So you identify who they are. And then once you've identified who they may be, whoever they are, who's the majority of people that come into your, not just your country, but to your town and to your little state, then you go, well, how do I locate where they are? And then how do I attract them? So it's not so much as saying, I want to appeal to more Europeans. You've got to take a step back from that and go, okay, well, who is coming to my island first? Who's the majority that are coming? And then focus on them and appeal to them.
You said DMO, Mark? DMO?
I just like tourism, just do a bit of research. I said Google. I said DMO because Thibault said it and it sounded clever and smart.
Right. And I'm taking other question. I see questions. We have people actually who've emailed us question. And thank you, Yuvika, for putting this together and telling me there's questions waiting in already. So let me take one, for example. What stage does the guest value proposition dilute Airbnb's and OTA's opportunity? Why so many managers increasing prices and channel to cover commission? Is
that from Richard Vaughan?
Yes, it is.
Very, very clever question from a very clever man. At what stage does the guest value proposition dilute Airbnb and other OTA opportunities?
I mean, there's fundamental return on investment numbers here from like real estate, and if you own your property or if you're doing rent to rent, whatever, there's a fine line. You cannot Airbnb would destroy the other market if they increase their commission, because they wouldn't get the return that they want to get. So I think there's some sort of like levers there around like what we're expecting as investors or real estate owners, whatever it is, to get their investment back.
Other question we had already, it's a long story, a question I would summarize, but somebody, for example, has properties are retargeted, kind of high-end and or targeted to families. And for the moment, they are listed on Airbnb and Facebook. They're creating their website, but they like, we also list for Vrbo, because maybe Vrbo, being a family-friendly website, could be a better target. How to think about it? When should I be adding yet another channel? How much work is it? And again, how important is it to think about your customer avatar before choosing a channel? Who can take it?
I'll go. You should be doing it straight away. Like, this is the beauty of having a solution like Uplisting, because when you've got a solution like Uplisting, you can then list your property, Tiffany, on multiple places and multiple sources. And the change that you make in Uplisting will then affect on all the others. So I would 100% be doing it. You got to make sure that you are visible and listed everywhere. The first thing you should do is just get listed everywhere. And as long as it's linking back to your property management software, fantastic. And then once you've got a year under your belt or 18 months under your belt, then you can do a report. And then you pull your report. And then on there, you're going to focus on the 20% of actions you're taking that's bringing 80% of your revenue in. So as long as you're listed everywhere, and if let's just say the top 5 that Thibault mentioned, and maybe a couple of the niche sites, you can go, right, well, out of all these places that I'm listing on, these are bringing in the majority of the traffic. So I'm going to focus more time and attention to there. And then you can start to use cool tools like RankBreeze, RankBreeze, that will be able to do analysis on your competition in the area and all those cool things and help and affect what you're doing. Then you can tap into, like Thibault was saying, with pricing, with price labs. You can have your set price, and you can go up and down and sort of go all those sort of things. So it's really important, and I say this everywhere, get listed everywhere. Don't just focus on one. Just take that time at the start of your journey and your business to get listed everywhere. Make sure it's all linking back to your uplisting, so you don't have to faff around with amending multiple sites at once or whatever. And then you go from there. Focus on the ones that are bringing in the majority of your revenue.
Yeah, I'll follow up on that. Vinny had mentioned in the chat how he and his family wanted to go somewhere. They went to Hawaii, but it might as well have been Puerto Rico. I think there's a real opportunity there for anybody who's operating anywhere in the world to work with the local tourism board. And I don't know how good Puerto Rico is at attracting inbound inbound travelers, but there are lots of really, really, really good local destination organizations, and tap them, like work with them, find out who the local tourism organization board is, talk to them about what they're doing to attract tourism. And if you get a good vibe, if they're doing good things, list with them. Like, that's an alternative to being reliant on the OTAs.
Yeah, one thing what we do so my family, my parents had a guest house in Donegal. We converted it into, which is in the northwest of Ireland, on the coast, and we converted it into short-term rental because they're kind of getting a bit older and want to have less work. But one thing that we do really well is we work with like golf tours and groups, and if there's anything that your property can is a little bit unique, or any angle you can go with, then you can increase bookings that way. So we have a lot of golf travelers coming from the US because they we're in the middle of like a location where there's lots of golf courses, and they can stay in our property, go up and down to the different courses, and have a fantastic time at a really cheap rate because the dollar is so strong. Lots of
I just want to say there's a full chapter in here about becoming the go-to. So, and Andres, the golf example is fantastic. Andres has put in here the Canary Islands, which is some islands off Spain, is very attractive right now to US guests. So how could you get visible in front of there? Well, number one, what you can do is you can start to build relationships with travel companies, tour companies, people that are picking people up from the airports, and start to get in with them. If you know that these American guests, when they come to the islands, they do a specific tour every single time, whatever it may be, could be sailing, fishing, whatever, then get pally with the business owners that are there and strike up these partnerships, strike up these these relationships. Your network is your net worth. Prime example of what we did at our family business. We were a farm stay business. We found a days out. It was called Piglet's Farm. They didn't do accommodation, but they opened their farm up for people to go and visit every day with the families. So what we did is we struck up a relationship that we would send guests their way. And we did it for a year solid without asking anything in return. And they were so happy because for free, for no marketing costs, we were sending guests that stayed with us to them, and they had a lovely day out. 2 years later, they started doing weddings on the farm, but they had no accommodation. So when the bride and groom were saying, where do you recommend for our guests to stay? Who do you think was the first person that they recommended? It was us. So we built up that network and that referral network, and it massively helped us. So if you're on the Canaries, or if you're in Puerto Rico, and if you're struggling to think, well, hang on a second, how am I going to get in front of these people? You're naturally going to go to, well, I need to be doing Facebook ads, I need to be doing Google ads. Don't waste your time and effort on that. Instead, look to build up those local relationships with businesses, with business owners, even with your guests, any guests that you've come to stay with you in the past, and they're from the area that you want to attract people from. And let's say, for example, Americans coming to the Canary Islands, and there's Americans that have stayed with you in the past, reach out to them. Just say, hey, thank you so much for coming to stay with us. Do you know anybody, any of your friends or family that are looking for a vacation? Please bear us in mind. You've got to always stay top of mind and be doing a couple of those sort of things. That's how you're going to get in front of these people.
Thanks to all for sharing your insights today. And so something I want to mention as well is that Boostly, Uplisting, and Touchstay all have special offers. I know I talked about this in the emails. You're going to get a follow-up email after this session with a recording, special offers, and how to redeem them, right? For example, Boostly is offering one month's free access to the Boostly content creator, Uplisting 10% off an entire year, and Touchstay 14-day free trial, full onboarding. So all the details of the offers are in the follow-up email with how to redeem those. So no worries. You can really have your time to check out the products and do explore those. I want to thank the speakers. Maybe have you share one final thought with us, and also tell us how to contact you. Want to get started?
I'll go first. Contact me, andy@touchstay.com. That's easy. Final thought for me is investing now for the future. And I think what's come out latterly in this discussion, certainly the last 10, 15 minutes, that investment doesn't have to be money, it's relationships. It's building up that relationship if you can. So that in years to come, when you need a network to lean on to drive more traffic in business, you've got a natural network to go to. So that would be my one takeaway.
Thank you, Andy. How about you, Mark?
Well, I think we've gone through friend or foe. OTAs are a friend or foe, and like I said, friends with benefits. So make sure you keep them at arm's length, make them work for you, not the other way around, and be in control of what you can do. Where can people reach out? Instagram is very cool, @Boostly UK. LinkedIn, it's Mark Simpson. But make sure you look out for a real cool project with Price Labs, with Touch Day and Uplisting that's coming up in December. It's the follow-up book to the playbook called the Book Direct Blueprint, which will help everybody in here if they want to really build their direct bookings. So it's coming in December, and thank you very much for having me.
Oh my God, the book flogging, the microphone. I always feel like I'm watching the musical, The Book of Mormon.
What a pro.
Entertaining. Vinny, how about you? Thank you, Mark.
So at Breslin on Twitter, I just put my Twitter link in there. That's kind of where I hang out a lot. Or Vincent at uplisting.io, and our website is www.uplisting.io. And if anyone wants to have a look around at our software, then just reach out and I'm happy to show you. But yeah, final thoughts, same as Andy and Mark. You know, Airbnb is the OTAs are there. You should use them, but build your own brand and business outside of them. Use them for what they're good at.
All right, thank you all for being here. We are 6 minutes over time. Thank you, speakers, for staying on. There's still 88 of you here on board. Thank you so much. I can see the chat, this conversation going on. So make sure to reach out to each and every of us, because clearly we're the type of people who love interacting with people and just giving good tips. Happy to do that. Thank you all for your time. Thank you, Yuvika, for putting this together and for sending all the emails to everybody. Take care, everyone. See you soon.
Thanks, folks.